This is Detective Romwell beginning the recording for case file 805, filed under the alias ChrisBird93. The case is titled 111, and the date of recording is January 17th, 2020. Beginning audio dramatization for records in 3, 2, 1. The wind was strong enough to make the rain fall sideways. Little streams were bubbling out from the gutters from the deluge we received, and were only now adding to the layers of water already running down the street. I was okay though. I was inside. Lots of small tea lights exaggerating big shadows and bringing objects to life as they flickered in the dark. That's why it was odd when I heard a knock on the door. The first time, I convinced myself it was something outside, but the second time was loud, rhythmic, and sped up as time went by. I slung an arm over the sofa as I stared at the door, and then lifted myself to my feet. I walked over to the source of the knocking, which was now rhythmic, fast, and unending, and switched on the light by the entrance. Through the molted glass in the door, I could see a small body illuminated in the porch light. It stopped knocking as my shadow crossed over the glass. Cautiously, I opened the door. Before was a small boy. He couldn't have been more than 10. He was shivering. His jeans were soaked through and a thin red shirt was stuck to his skin. Water dripped from the points that had formed in his fringe as he shuddered. One. I glanced a cursory look outside, but this boy was alone and I knew it. My house is the second in a small cul-de-sac that you can come to as you enter my small town. If he'd come from the main road in, he'd been walking for hours. I swore under my breath, trying to hide my shock. "Hey there," I said gently. "Are you lost? Where are your parents?" I pulled him inside and rushed him into the lounge, then grabbed him a towel and began to rub it all over his hair to help it dry. He continued to shiver. One. He stumbled over the word again. One. I stayed with him for a few moments to see if I could glean any information from him. Did he have any parents in the area? Or someone I could call? But he continued the same line over and over again. One. I went into the bathroom and began to draw a bath, and added in half the contents of my luxury bath soak. When I came back to the lounge, the boy was stood in the window and looking out to my neighbor's house. Mrs. Gold was a lovely little old lady that lived in the first house in our cul-de-sac. Her lights are always off by 8, but as I leaned over to peer out the window nearly 2 hours after that, all of her lights were on. "Hey," I soothed, "are you okay?" The boy didn't respond. "Is that where you came from?" I asked hopefully. It wasn't likely, but I'd ask anyways. The boy whipped his head around and made a single laugh, his whole body lurching forward manically. His arms shifted to his sides in resignation. An instant later, the smile disappeared behind sad but wild eyes. "One," he stuttered. "Let's get you in a bath," I murmured. The poor boy was clearly suffering from something. I took him to the bathroom and told him to relax, and that I was going to get him some help a little later. As I closed the door, I saw him take off his shirt, long red marks covering his back. Some of them were bleeding. I didn't ask. He clearly wasn't ready to talk about them yet. I went into the kitchen and called my sister while I put on some pasta, but couldn't get through. It was pretty normal for us to ignore each other if we were busy with something. If the person rings again, that means you have to answer. The pasta was nearly done when I went over to the bathroom door. I knocked gently. "How you doing in there?" I asked, as sweetly as I could muster. There was no answer, so I gently opened the door to peek inside. The boy was gone. I went in and swept bubbles out of the way of the water. Truly, he had vanished. I briskly walked back to the kitchen and decided to call my sister again. The whole situation was getting under my skin. As I began to dial, I saw the boy. He walked around from the corner of the door with a malevolent smile on his lips, and his sodden wet clothes stuck to his body. One! It was as if it was obvious, as if there was something I wasn't getting. My sister answered the phone. I put it on the table. One! He brought his hands in front of him. One! He said again, his arms willing me to understand That's when I saw the knife. I backed up immediately, petrified of the small, wet youngster wielding one of my blades. He launched himself across the table towards me. He grabbed my hair and scratched and bit as I thrashed my arms and screamed. I managed to hold the knife away from me for a moment, but it wasn't long before he writhed it free and planted it in my sternum. He was still wearing that malevolent smile. He looked at me and sneered. With all the strength I had, I threw the boy into the cabinets to the side. Despite the knife still firmly embedded into my torso, the boy leapt up to his feet, and I had heaved myself up. I raced towards him with no real purpose or intent, but the fear in his eye had him fleeing for the door. I blacked out soon after, but my sister, having heard the entire commotion, had already called the police and an ambulance. The report ends there, and from what I can tell, the victim didn't go much further into detail. But lucky for me, the kid is someone I could probably trace down, so that's what I'll be focusing my efforts on, and we'll see if anything comes of that. These are the April tapes, and this is Detective Romwell, signing off.